Here we go.
Welcome to Control Talk Now for the week of March 8th, 2021. No, you're still in the right place. Eric and Ken, we have no clue where they're at. My name is Marc Petock, and guess what? I, along with Project Haystack, am taking over Control Talk Now for this week. Welcome. This is episode 392. Joining me is John Petze, Executive Director and unbelievable rock and roll blues drummer, and Brian Frank, curator of Project Haystack. So welcome, guys. Welcome to the show. So, I'm going to start us off by saying what's happening in the Project Haystack world. To say a lot, to me is a hell of an understatement. Let me share some things. So first and foremost, this month, March, marks Haystack's 10th year anniversary. Can you believe it? We have been at this for 10 years. And more to come about that a little bit later on in the show. This year, we're also announced and already deep in preparation for Haystack Connect, which is taking place May 4th through the 6th. Like everything else in our world today, it's virtual. This is going to be our 5th Haystack Connect. We started our first one 2013, followed by 2015, 2017, 2019, and yes, 2021. Yes, it's virtual, as I mentioned, but best of all, what we've decided this year, it is open to anyone who wants to attend. So there is no registration fees. There's no fees at all. It is open to everyone and anyone across the globe. And I think, want to give a quick shout out. We've already gotten a lot of companies who are sponsoring and supporting the event this year. John's going to talk a little bit about who they are a little bit later on, and you can go to our website and take a look at those sponsors. But we greatly appreciate it. Continuing on what's been going on in the world of Project Haystack, the methodology continues to really, let's just use the term rock and roll globally. It's being utilized in buildings of all types and all sizes. And, it's truly in millions and deployed in millions of square feet throughout the world. And, it's also interesting, we're noticing that the Project Haystack standard, the methodology, is now being included as part of specifications that are coming out. And, as part of the success of the 10 years has been the community that really is behind, that really supports Project Haystack. Like everything, it's global and consists of everybody in the industry, from owners and operators to developers, system integrators, solution and technology providers, OEMs, and just those people who are interested in what Project Haystack is and the benefit and the value it does deliver. So right now, we have more member companies who are supporting the organization than we ever have had before. And kind of wrapping this up, many of you probably have been familiar with Haystack Connection magazine, which is our group's twice a year magazine, comes out in spring and the fall. And we're getting ready to put together now an April edition of our spring edition. So look for that. So without further ado, let me turn it over to the drummer extraordinaire, Mr. John Petze.
Mark, thanks a lot. Appreciate Eric and Ken going, what they do, go golfing today or something? Whatever.
They're just missing in action. You never ask. You never ask when they're not here.
Appreciate the opportunity to take it over. I wanted to actually start with a little bit, very brief background, because we get a great opportunity here with Brian Frank, the curator of the technology, to be with us today. So let's just talk for a moment, about the what it is, briefly, very briefly, right? And the why. And, when we got started with this 10 years ago, the challenge was, how do you make data from different systems and devices easy to work with, or even be able to work with it at all, right? And that's really the goal of what Project Haystack is about. We need to make data from diverse systems and devices and easy to work with. And here, 10 years on, there are so many more devices and equipment systems out there, right? And the reason we want to do this is we want to get to a plug-and-play world with building systems, sensors, equipment, et cetera. So where with a push of a button, we can get the value out of the data that these devices contain and produce, right? And the way that Haystack solves the challenge is with a concept called tagging, right? But most importantly, it's a standardized methodology of how we're going to describe the meaning of data, how we're going to add what's called metadata to it. And if we do that in a standard way, then it's going to be easy for other applications to consume data and create the value from it. Now, the concept's built around tags. You probably heard about tagging. What's a tag? Well, it's a snippet of information that tells you about an attribute of an entity, no different than the concept of a manila paper tag. That's where the name came from. And tags and then a data model help us describe systems, and we can define the things in our buildings in a logical, replicable way that's easily understood by both software, machines, and humans. And I like to say, think of it as a markup language for data, because it allows us to know what the data means. So, that's just a little bit of background on it. We'll get back here at the end of the session, but we want to take advantage of the opportunity to spend time with Brian Frank, the technical curator of Project Haystack. Welcome, Brian. Thanks for joining us, and good to see you. Brian and I haven't been able to see much of each other in the last year. But hey, one of the things that people often misunderstand about Haystack is that it's not standardized naming, right? It is not imposing standard names and telling people how they have to name their sensors or points or devices. Can you talk a little bit about that and bring us into the whole concept of semantic tagging?
Sure. Okay. Thanks for having me, and excited to be here. So let's talk a little bit about that. So, if we go back to the dark days before Project Haystack, which, was a while ago, over 10 years ago, really the only piece of information you had to tell people what a given sensor or set point was about was the name you gave it in the building automation system, or whatever the system happened to be. And, that one little piece of information sort of conveyed to humans, what the point was all about. Now, a lot of these old systems had, limited character strings. So people would try to cramp, all sorts of stuff into 16 characters to mean, what air handler was associated with and what it was doing. And, that's great. And that can lead towards the beginning of semantically understanding what your data is about. But it's way too limiting. You just can't describe everything about a sensor or a piece of equipment in one little human phrase. So that's where the tagging came along. It was sort of an idea that people are used to tagging. I mean, we've had tags in Twitter and Flickr and all of these sorts of things, and Gmail labels. And it's a really easy way for anyone to start marking up their data. And so the idea was that you could have your name, whatever you want to call it, temperature point or whatever it may be. And then the tags would live separately. And the tags would be a more formalized way to say what something is. This is a sensor measuring zone temperature, or this is a valve for the hot water coil. And the tags were a standardized way to agree on terminology for what those things might mean so that both humans and machines could make sense of points and equipment and the interrelations between all of those things. And then since then, and so that's sort of how Haystack got started. And, this is one of the things people sort of, they might have come across Haystack 8 years ago, and that's where it started, but it's become a lot more since then. So the original idea of Haystack was, let's tag data, right? Let's throw tags at things so that we can make sense of what it is. But over the last 10 years, the world has moved on, and people are expecting richer, more advanced data modeling techniques to be used. And that's really what we've been doing over the last, I would say, 3 years with Haystack 4, is taking that tagging model and adding a lot of the techniques and mechanisms used in other data science fields to turn it into a full ontology. And basically, what we mean by ontology is we've taken tags and we've organized them into a much more formal model. Okay, so we now know with tags that water is a type of liquid, and that we know that a VAV is a type of air terminal unit. And there's a lot more information built into the model now than there was previously. The other thing we've done with Haystack 4 is we've added a lot of integration to the tools which your typical data scientists use, which come from the semantic web world. And those include tools like RDF and OWL and those sort of suite of technologies, which, they're used by a new group of people coming into this industry, which is, I would term them data scientists, which, these people are coming in, and we're doing a lot more data science with our buildings than we ever were before. And that data needs to be still integrated with what, your traditional building automation system guys are doing, your mechanical engineers who are installing these systems. And I think one of the amazing things we've done, right, is we've sort of glued these two worlds together. I don't believe that your typical, contractor is ever going to understand the set of technologies used by a data scientist who came out of academia with a PhD, right? But they understand tags. We've been extremely successful getting these guys to use tags and get their head around them. And what we've done, which is pretty amazing, is sort of merge these two worlds together, is say, look, use tags over here, data scientists, you now can work with all that data in the way that you're familiar with. And it all seamlessly works together. So anyways, that's my sort of my quick where we've been the last 10 years.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad you brought out that point about the evolution. Because, one of the things being involved on kind of the marketing outreach and conveying information and helping people understand is, people will seize on oftentimes, well, this is what I heard Haystack did 10 years ago, 9 years ago, 8 years ago. And, everything has evolved. I think about, my phone. The phone I had 10 years ago didn't do what this does, right? And you think about anything, the web apps that we use on a daily basis, how my TVs were, everything in software continues to advance and evolve. And I think that's a really important point. Haystack has continued to advance and evolve to meet the needs of both sides of the equation, like you pointed out, Brian, right? Richer tools, more complete tag sets for the people who are working with the equipment, and all of those software level tools, for the data scientists and people building software applications. And I think that's one of the things we need to get across, and for people to come to the event, that's what you get across. There'll be presentations there from both sides of that world, right? People doing the data science, as well as here we've broken down the ontology for air handlers or VAVs or whatever. So that's been an important part of it.
So I got a question, and maybe both of you, and as we're talking about this, one of the things that has truly fascinated me over the years with Haystack, that's not the technology side of it and not the business side of what we're solving, but it's the fact that it's community driven, and the fact that all of this stuff that, Brian, you just mentioned, one of the key central points of this is the working groups. Can you guys make a couple of comments about the working groups, how it works and how they work, I should say, and so forth and so on?
Yeah, Brian, will you start with, I remember when we got started, the whole idea of not only open source, but the really key point about the licensing model. Do you want to just talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, so, we when we started the Project Haystack, the idea was, this is it's a standards process, right? We're trying to get the community, right, of people in the industry to agree on terminology and tags to use for their data. And there's all sorts of different ways to go about that. And most things that have been done in our industry have been done, through standardizations bodies like ASHRAE is probably the most important one for building automation, but we have OASIS and IEEE and ITF, all these ones out there, right, that are going through and standardizing something. We decided that we thought the best way to tackle this was as an open source project and using sort of the ethos that open source projects are run by, putting all of our information out on, and now it's on GitHub. At the time, it was on in Bitbucket, and running it as an open source project. And that's how it got started. And then over the years, as the community's grown, I think we've seen that, we needed to formalize some of those processes. So somewhere I would say midpoint through that evolution, we formalized the idea of working groups and having a champion take on a topic and get it merged into, the master repo that lives on GitHub. And that's been very successful. A lot of the latest, all the Haystack 4 stuff was run through the working groups, and we have working groups for standardizing weather data. And I think there's some guys in Holland working on geothermal heat pumps. So, you get all sorts of niche working groups as well as very core infrastructure working groups. But in the end, I would say the project is run similar to other open source projects.
Yeah, well, that actually, I think, brings up another thing that maybe everybody isn't familiar with, because I think, I've been in the BAS industry for a long time. We won't recognize how long that is at the moment. But the industry lived on prescribed standards handed down to them by organizations. And while those bodies may have had the opportunity to contribute to develop that, it was a very different model, right? This is a model that requires participation. People have come in over the years and say, hey, I don't see a model for, pick a number, or I'll give you a good example. The model for electrical distribution equipment seems really immature, right? And we said, yeah, do you know something about it? Come join us. And remember, people from National Renewable Energy Lab jumped in and they fleshed that out. So it really requires that different type of ethos of the people who are doing the work in buildings and equipment systems to come together and solve these problems together. But they're solving it around a very defined methodology. And that gets back to your role as a curator, Brian. Maybe you can explain what that means in open source, right? Because there's a way to solve these problems, but oftentimes the people who are coming in with expertise in one system or another, they may not be that familiar with, how you work around a standard methodology, right?
Yep, and I think this is where even more so than back, in the days when we were standardizing, say, the BACnet protocol. To really standardize an ontology for, equipment systems requires really, really deep domain expertise. I'm not a mechanical engineer. I only know the basics of lighting systems and HVAC systems and hydronic systems and chiller plants. My background is more on the data science side. And so really, what you see is your traditional domain expert, who's probably a mechanical engineer, probably doesn't have a deep background in data science. And likewise, your data scientists don't have a deep background in the domain. And so you've got to get these two guys together, right, to do this work. And that's really where, my role has been really just a facilitator, because I'm not a domain expert. And so when we talk about getting the ontology flushed out for a specific vertical, let's say, vertical transportation, for example, is something that's not really done. I mean, we need domain experts who really understand that to say, these are the terms of art that are used, and these are the concepts that we need to model. And then that gets flushed out. And like John said, there's already a framework for how it works with tags and the infrastructure we've built. But you still have to say, we all agree that these are the terms of art that matter for this particular problem domain. And that's that it takes time and it's a difficult task, but the only way it gets done is domain experts chip in their time and make it happen.
Yeah. And that's the aspect, and I think, Marc, you were getting to this. This is the aspect of this is an open source community. Not only is the final output offered as open source software and technology, but the way it got there was through the collaboration of an open source community. And that's different than a lot of there are other standards out there and they're offered as open source, but they may have been developed by a very small group. And this is a very different process and approach. What you see in the software world, and having been with it for 10 years, there's no question in my mind that while it's still difficult work, there would have been no way to solve this problem in a classic prescribed standard model, because all of the problems weren't even understood. All the systems weren't understood. You needed those guys to come together for that. So
and I think part of this, what it's been amazing to me is not only the number of folks that are participating in the working groups, but the fact that it's global and people see things differently in, outside of North America. We might see things differently. So again, we're bringing the expertise and, the knowledge base from around the globe into this open source community environment. So
yeah, I got a good example of that. A few years ago, somebody said, "Hey, you got all this technology and documentation, but I need reference and examples, right?" And I ended up working with a guy out of Australia on one of a key document we have about reference. Here's a reference implementation of how you start from a building and take it all the way through. I didn't meet him until a year or two after that was published in person, actually in 2019 at Haystack Connect. So we want to talk a little bit about the event. We've talked about the community, how everyone comes together, and the important role this event has that we started in 2013. And, after 10 years, we look back and we continue to advance the technology. But one of the things we saw very early on that we needed was that we needed to get together with an event in person. And so 2013 marked the first year of that event. And, what it allowed us to do was bring people into the discussion at many different layers, whether you were a newbie or an expert, right? You come together and you learn from the people there. And as we said earlier, this year marks the first time it's been fully virtual, a bit of a negative, but the second thing is there's no cost to attend due to the support of all our sponsors. And I do want to point them out at the end. So we're moving into our fifth event over the last 10 years. Here's the homepages from the different events that we had over the years, and you can see how the website's matured as well as the technology there. So, but let's talk about the program. One of the key things about the Haystack Connect event is this is a community-driven event. So that means the presentations are driven by the community, the things they want to talk about, the examples they want to deliver, the learning they want to get from it. So it's very different than a lot of other conferences that are in some way led or dominated by a single manufacturer or whatever. So let's just look at the three tracks. So first of all, we have the technical track, and Brian will be a key part of that. And one of the major things there will be the conclusion of what was called the public review of Haystack 4 that's been worked on for almost 4 years now. And Brian, do you just want to comment a little bit about that, the public review concept and Haystack 4 and how things have become settled with the standard over the last few years?
Yeah. I mean, so, it's been going on for several years, this effort to formalize the tagging model into an ontology and integrate all these semantic web technologies, the data science tools such as RDF. And that's happened over the last 4 years. And basically for the last year, that's all settled out. And we've been giving vendors time to implement it. So several vendors have now implemented this stack of technologies. You're going to hear about some open source announcements of those. But basically, now that it's been out there, vendors have implemented it. We're going to sort of try to wrap this whole process up. I think at this point in time, everyone who's involved in Haystack is mostly using Haystack 4. It is now sort of the de facto standard, as replaced what we were doing with Haystack 3. So,
Thanks. And so nobody gets deterred. Even if you're new to this, there's going to be a crash course on how you get up to speed on all of this. So again, whether you're new to this or looking for the most advanced, in-depth information, or you're participating in the working groups, that's what the program is for. Then we have the applications track, where we have people who are out practicing this actually show their projects, their examples. We've had some great examples over the years from the community. I think some of the things that are going to be really interesting this year is Haystack's being used in more than just commercial BAS, right? I know there's going to be one session around its use in residential applications, smart home applications. So, it looks like we'll have some people commenting on applying into digital twins, because to implement a digital twin, you have to have a data model of the equipment systems and their data. And then one of the other parts of it is we like to call it Shark Tank for IoT data applications. It was a huge success last time. We give people 10 minutes to introduce their new products and applications, right? And we did a lot of fun competition last year, but this is where people who've been implementing Haystack and Haystack 4 get a chance to show off their products as hardware products, software products, tools, et cetera. And so that's a key part of it.
This is of all the good content that we do that is presented at the event, the Pitch Fest is my personal favorite, because you get up there and we keep it to 10 minutes. We have a stopwatch, go, and then when that 10-minute mark hits, it's stop, and we will get up there and interrupt you and whatever. So it truly is. And, it'd be interesting, your reference, John, to Shark Tank, it would be interesting maybe next time around we take it further and get some comments like the Shark Tank folks deliver as well. But anyway, so I encourage, those who are going to be joining us, this is really a fun and interesting piece of the program.
It is, and it shows what people are doing with products. So,
exactly.
We issue two issues of the magazine per year, and the spring 2021 issue will be delivered shortly before the event. The important thing about the magazine is, again, community contributed. You see articles from consulting engineers, you see articles from building owners commenting on why they took the effort to implement Haystack or require their vendors to implement Haystack. I think we've had about 8 or 9 issues of the magazine over the years, and we'll have an important issue out. And it's always real world content, which is really key. Again, from introductory type articles to some pretty deep articles around how the technology is being used. And we need to talk about the sponsors more than ever. Again, with a virtual event that's free to everyone, the sponsors make this possible. We introduced a concept called Community Champion Sponsor, someone who really makes a big commitment. J2 Innovations, a Siemens company, has done that this year. And then the platinum sponsors: Altura, eMagic, Sky Foundry, Siemens, and Tritium. So we appreciate all of that. And then gold sponsors: Building Fit, Buildings IoT, KMC, Linkspring. And silver sponsors of Novant and Yorkland. And then the media sponsors, including our friends here at Control Trends, who've made this possible, and a number of other organizations that help us spread the word, quite frankly, and bring more people to understand what Haystack's about. So with that, I don't know. You want to let the Ken and Eric out of the closet now, Marc? Or?
I've been sitting here as we're, having this discussion, and I've been, sending out emails trying to search where they are. Again, no one knows, but, it wouldn't surprise me if they just jettisoned off somewhere into a warm climate, or sitting there having, daiquiris and margaritas, enjoying the blue ocean waters in the Caribbean or somewhere like that. Or, someone actually sent me an email saying, maybe they're on a spy mission somewhere, truly this is their day job, but their night job is maybe they work for the CIA or one of these other organizations, and they're out doing their thing. But, to conclude, I really want to thank the Honorable, and I use that term loosely, Eric Stromquist, and of course, Ken Smyers, the man, the myth, the legend, the one and only from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, for letting us really take over this. And so in honor of them and their absence, Ken, Eric, be bold, stay in control. And for me, Brian, and John, get haystacked.
All right.
That's a wrap.